Hello everybody, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. It's time for a Dream Teams that's been long in the making. Quick story, me and Loz had a chat just as the season was sort of coming to its crescendo, and I was like, Loz, can I get a quick topical chat and then we could do Dream Teams after that? I did that, and then my wife sort of knocked on the door and went, I think I'm having a child. So I had to leg it in. Turns out she wasn't having a child, but later that evening she then was having a child.
Faking it. And I was for attention. That's exactly what they do, isn't it?
Yeah. So
thank God we didn't do it. Yeah, that's what I hate about them. Bringing a bit of the kick off. That's what I think is good. Actually, is we managed to get one clip away, which still went out on the channel. So we didn't get halfway through a Dream Teams and then do the other stuff. It went the other way. But it was the old team back on the road, wasn't it? Like I remember when you launched your channel. Well, you sort of launched the Football Manager stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and I felt like I was taken into the heart of a lot of the people on the channel. And then later that summer, I was exposed as a horrible person. But before that, I was really in heart. My bad. You're right. But after that, I felt great. It's just lovely to be back.
That's great to have you back. If you haven't seen Loz's doc on Jordan Henderson, there's another clip because I just milk Loz dry. Enjoy that image.
And then we did a video.
Yeah, and then we spoke about Jordan Henderson and that doc. Where is that doc, by the way?
It's going up on the Liverpool channel. It's actually today as we film. It's being finally sort of approved. Jurgen Klopp's people are watching it as we speak and going, good, tick, 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 and away it goes. Because that's the way football works, apparently. So.
Indeed. The crucial thing is, will Jordan Henderson be in this 11? Well, there are decisions still to be made in a Dream Teams first, Loz, where you have some options that you still need to decide on, and we thought, let's do it in the moment.
Live.
Via the gut. Live. / pre-recorded, then edited down and put out when I find the time. So let's.
Don't like my new nickname of the gut, by the way. I think that's a bit rude.
Okay, well, no, it's done now. Sorry.
Let's go and consult the gut.
Just you. Right, so let's do your team. Several Liverpool players, so the Liverpool fans will be pleased with that.
Several, yeah.
I guess going into it, what did it reveal within your mind in terms of you making your picks? What was important to you?
It's interesting because it revealed more to me about how I'm not good at tiering things. I'm not very good at going, that is the greatest of all time, or this is my one favorite thing. It revealed to me I'm much more of a Venn diagram type manager, or Zen diagram, as some people out there might call it. And so I just put people in like categories and then try and link them all together. And that's how that works for me. So it does, I don't just go greatest of all time. Some people can do that. They can go, who's your top 5 footballers of all time? Ronaldo, Messi, narrowed up. I don't care.
It's tough, isn't it? It's tough.
Yeah.
I have had, off the record conversations with several people who sometimes go, I just don't care. And fortunately, I've created a channel where I can, and being a QPR fan, I can have that moment where I can literally go, I don't care enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you get away with it because the fact that you don't have an affiliation to a top side in the Premier League,
Michael Beale has arrived.
Means that I know you went on about that, and then it means that you can.
Well, once a year, can I do it once a year? Is that all right, Loz? What are you talking about on your channel so often? Yeah, your club. All right. A bit.
Gets the clicks, doesn't it? Yeah, one of them gets the clicks. So
why do you think I'm not talking about QPR? Sorry.
But the point I'm trying to make is, ultimately, I think I care a lot about a lot of different players, and so it makes it difficult to pick them. And I had almost, I knew what it felt like to be a manager there.
Yeah. Do you know what I think is difficult as well? Obviously, Liverpool fan, and therefore there's such a plethora of options. Whereas, like, say I chat with Spencer, so we did Dream Teams with Spencer, and you're going
Mark Noble, innit?
Well, Mark Noble and Pyatt will probably be in, I would imagine.
Right.
They're sort of like go-to players, whereas like in every position, there's so many options if you want to go down like the history route or the modern day route or I just had a fancy for them, whatever it may be.
it's so little balance in these kind of Liverpool 11s, and also like everyone's got their sentimental version of that. So you almost just have to bow down sentiment when it comes to making these sides.
So that was what I was going to say in terms of your Zen or Venn diagram, depending on what letter you want to use. Importantly, it's letters near the end of the alphabet. What would you say matters the most?
On my Yen diagram, I think what mattered most to me was how can I put it? I was actually thinking about this last night before we had this conversation. The fact that those people mixed the sentiment that I had for them with the success that then validates them in other people's minds, and that something people can attach themselves to. And I think, not to go on about making a documentary, but when you're trying to make a documentary, you're looking for these kind of these common subjects that people, archetypes that people can attach themselves to.
Sure. And
very often, I think what I've found in all these people is there is that archetype there, and then if you pull up the thread, there's lots more that comes with it, and all of them sort of fit that in some way, which is what makes me, I think, relate to a player.
Okay, so as we look to pitch the next documentary, let's start off with your goalkeeper.
Absolutely. He's bloody gorgeous.
Go on, give us your goalkeeper. Let's go.
Alisson is my goalkeeper. I had a lot. For some weird reason, as a kid, I really related to goalkeepers. Like, I wasn't particularly good at football as a child, and so often I went.
Quite good goalkeeper, as well.
Right, and it's because but I wasn't a good player, and I'm still not a great player. I'm just a serviceable player. So, and I'm quite tall, and I can kind of make myself nice and big, and I don't mind getting in the way of the ball. And so, throughout my childhood, I had to put up with like David James to look up to. And I was gutted because in no way as a kid did I relate to David James. I was very straight-laced. I was very serious about life.
Shirt tucked in.
Shirt always tucked in. And, so I'd buy these goalkeeper jerseys and I just wouldn't have anything to relate to. And then I realized David James was actually super straight-laced and just trying to be a bit weird. And then I really related to him. And then I don't know why I'm still talking about David James. And then along came Sander Westerveld, who changed my life.
Wow.
And because he did his hair very, like Michael Owen sort of, it was gelled and like that. And from there on out, I was like, okay, Liverpool goalkeepers I relate to. And then I loved Pepe Reina. That's about the politics. Loved the goalkeeper. Sure. And I think most Liverpool fans did. And we thought, in the modern era, we will never get a better goalkeeper. He comes out, he claps the cup, the fans love him. He's doing all right. He's a great cheerleader. He's won the World Cup, so it sort of validates us. He's won the Euros, so it validates us. Alisson. Alisson comes along and changes.
You've skipped someone there. You've skipped two there. You've skipped a Mignolet and you've skipped yourself a Karius, who could have been. I mean, Karius, two could have good-looking goalkeepers. You've had a few over the years. Not Mignolet, but Karius.
Karius, too good-looking. Right. Too good looking in a way that he knows it. Alisson, good looking, has no idea how beautiful he is. That's what I like about him. When you look at him, it's beard, it's hair, he's just so selfless and brilliant. And then when I was lucky enough to interview him for the documentary, it 10x'd my love for him. And I imagine you have this with a lot of the guys that you interview. When you get to chat to them and they don't just reveal that they're just a boring person that just answers the questions. They sort of, his grasp of English was better than mine. He answered every question perfectly. Any avenue I went down, he was just willing to sort of go with me, talk to me about the role of goalkeeper. Yes, I'll talk about it in these really sort of weird existential terms. What do you think about life and people? Yeah, we should care about everyone and I care about this. Like, he was so personable and yet is such a great goalkeeper. I love that kind of give and take of it all. And then at the same time, he's huge and is already a Liverpool legend because of what he's won. And I don't think that back line is the same without him. So even though Liverpool have been obviously good without him, it's very different without him.
When in the sort of the format of this, I always find there's sort of very weird questions that you don't really ask people. And the one that kind of comes up with, if it's going to be Liverpool people, is that and I'm staring at your team here, and there's a few options, but you haven't got too many of the current crop. The question I have with that is it difficult, as someone who's supported Liverpool for so long, does it feel like somewhat cheating when you put someone like Alisson in, or people that have kind of arrived in the last 3 or 4 years? Because it's like, well, with these things, you almost need to let them kind of like breathe and marinate a bit, and then
Ferment
you go,
a bit,
yeah, no, I know, no, I know now that he's definitely a legend, and two, like the greatest in my mind of this, of the team that you're putting forward. Like,
I think it's also just like
you could put forward, you could literally go. There's an 11, isn't there, of Liverpool now, aside from Mane leaving recently, whatever, that could go into your team. They'd all be plausible.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the thought process for you is tricky, I would imagine.
Kind of, but then also I think it makes for quite a boring conversation because then you're talking in quite a current sort of way. And I think what I picked with Alisson and whoever else goes in is that I feel that there is something a bit, not to sound too wanky, but a bit transcendent about them. Like, I feel like if Alisson was a goalkeeper back in the 50s, there'll be these photos of him and he would be one of those FIFA cards. Maybe he'd have worn a flat cap or something. Like, he's one of those guys that you look at him at any generation and you can imagine him in goal. You look at other guys in this team as well that I've picked from the modern era, and I feel like they compare very favorably to anyone else from any time. So that's why I've gone for those guys.
I think what I would say to myself if I was you would be like, well, Alisson is necessary. Alisson was necessary, wasn't he? Because that was the problem with Liverpool. It was like, even people like Grobbelaar, but what I saw Grobbelaar was he was a clown. And David James couldn't come for crosses. Pepe Reina was fine, but the rest of the team, I guess, was
serviceable. But
then Karius was a bit of a mess. So like.
The point is also that they fit the ethos of the team, these good goalkeepers. Like, every good goalkeeper seems to, like, you've got Schmeichel for United, then you've got Van der Sar for United, then you've got, I don't want to say Jens Lehmann for Arsenal. That sounds a bit ridiculous because I don't actually feel like he does some of them. Petr Cech or someone like that for Chelsea. There are plenty of goalkeepers that you go, that's my guy. Alisson is my guy with that. And also, he's just so lovable. And not only that, like, I think he has a great presence about him, which isn't about being like the most aggressive or like in your face or any of these things. He seems to float just slightly above that. And what I like about goalkeepers is, and I think what you were alluding to with Bruce Grobbelaar, he was almost too human to be a goalkeeper, but he was quite mad, and people like that he was quite mad. But that madness isn't the key. The madness that separates them from the reality that then makes them a bit scary. And Alisson has this thing where he sort of just floats above the reality of the whole game, and goalkeepers have to do that. If you're 3-0 down, you need a goalkeeper who's going to float above that. If you're 3-1 up and you're, or 2-1 up or whatever, very narrow margins, you need someone who's not going, God, we're 2-1 up, I must save this. You need someone who just exists outside of that. And I feel like he exists as like some sort of like Zelda character that just came into the team.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Great choice. I think also lovely early pick as well, if you know what I mean. Like, because he's got years in the bank, he's going to be there for a long time. I think.
Absolutely.
Like, once he's done, I think he's right up there in the conversation.
He could be He could be the greatest Liverpool goalkeeper of all time by the time he finishes.
Get yourself ready for that conversation in 2028 on the kickoff. I'm excited to watch it.
I'm still on the kickoff at that point.
Hey,
we've had a great run. We've had a great run.
Don't turn your nose up at that. Right back. First of your gut calls, Mr. Gut. Let's begin.
First of the gut call. Let's not try and coin that. It's
it seems to be there. Let us know if you like and would like to use on other social media platforms, starting off in the comments with Mr. Gut. Tell Mr. Gut how you feel about Mr. Gut. You've got two options. I'll tell you the options, which you know already, but I'll tell the people just to set it up. And then you tell me your thought process on both, and then give us your gut call, Mr. Gut. So Trent Alexander-Arnold on that same road of, newbies on the way in. Of course, he is a Liverpool lad. He's one of our own. And then Dani Alves, one of the most decorated footballers ever. Full stop. Yeah. Talk to me.
Trent Alexander-Arnold, we lack, or we thought we'd never get another Steven Gerrard type character in the Liverpool team. And I think a lot of people, some people were almost a bit grateful for that, because I think in many ways Gerrard's time came at the wrong time. If he'd come during the Klopp era, maybe there would have been a different Gerrard. If he'd come during the Roy Evans era, maybe there would have been a different Gerrard. It felt like he'd maybe landed at Liverpool in just maybe slightly the wrong era, and it had shaped him into being a great player. But there are always times where you wonder about, if he'd been under Klopp, would he have had a similar thing to what Trent's going through, or what any of these young guys coming through are going through? where they get taught to channel their ego into a certain way to be able to benefit the side. And I feel like with Gerrard, there became this untouchable nature to him. And it very much feels like Trent and the other guys who are coming through the team have learned from that. They are now very human, very expressive. They will tell you, you know, how they feel. He's a very thoughtful kid. You know, again, when I interviewed him recently, he took like 10 seconds before almost every answer to really think about what he was going to say. And he was really, I guess, crafted and thoughtful about what he was saying. And then out on the pitch, he is clearly a great football player. And he has done some amazing things. And what I love about it is he's this gentle character off the field, but you can see what a competitive, like, classic footballer I think he is. And I do think he's a classic footballer in that sense. Like, I feel like he's not just a right back, he's so much more than that for Liverpool.
Do you think he's formation proof when it comes to Liverpool and his time there? Because obviously people talk about it a lot of the time in terms of him and Reece James, and there's all that discussion when it comes to England and can it work for England, because, you know, even like recent friendlies, he's playing in a 3-5-2, which is obviously not what he's used to at Liverpool. If a new manager comes in and a new style of play occurs, do you think he's fine? Do you think he just adapts?
I mean, first of all, I think there's always these outside shouts for him to go into midfield, which I think most people would be interested just as an exercise to see him do that. And then the second one is, I think in the modern game, he's probably formation proof in terms of what right backs are asked to do. And I think there will probably be an element of, what is this new manager doing if he wasn't to be as progressive with Trent down the right? And there is an interesting shift. I know it's weird because, you know, football always feels like it's like, right, it's 4-3-3 and it'll be 4-3-3 forever. I've noticed a bit more of a shift to going back to a 2 and more of a 4. And sometimes I wonder if Trent later in his career, if we do move more back towards 4-4-2, becomes more of a David Beckham type midfielder where he drifts out onto the right, is more of a right side midfielder when Hendo's not in the team anymore, when Liverpool move on to their next shape, whether that works as well, especially later on in his career as well.
Dani Alves then, where's he come from? Why is he was in the reckoning at least?
Well, so when I was a kid, I remember we were linked with him because Rafa Benitez really wanted him. And I saw him play against us. I can't remember when it was, but I just loved, I remember watching him a lot and being like, God, I love that guy. Like, this guy is incredible. And I loved his energy. He has, you know, the best footballers, they have like an aura about them. He's always had that aura of, there's something like every time he gets the ball, he's going to dart there or dart there. It's going to go inside somewhere. You know, there's something special that's about to happen when he's on the ball. I think that's the point. I
think I've said previously with Dream Teams, I have a sort of problem with Dani Alves where I just had a period where I'd watched a couple of games and he didn't put in good crosses. And then it was in my mind that Dani Alves doesn't put in good crosses. And I honestly watched him for 5-6 years. And I think I tweeted this. I remember a lot of people had that with other players where they're like, I've just not seen it. Like, I don't understand what's going on with him. But I think later in his career, I did get to see it. And obviously the longevity is outrageous. The fact that he goes back to Barcelona and does what he does recently, all that stuff is there. So I'm wrong. I'm aware of that. But I just had a real problem with him. So there's a bit of a blind spot with me with Dani Alves.
A bit of a dip maybe? Or so, yeah, I do get what you mean though.
So, Mr. Gut, who are you going with?
It's got to be Trent. I just feel like Dani Alves is like an honourable mention in that sense. Like, he's someone who, again, you know, I feel like Cafu and Dani Alves and all those guys probably look at him and go, yeah, that's me in the modern era. Yeah. Perfect. Like, that's how it works. And not only that, but I think Trent's future Liverpool captain. Again, I think, you know, in many ways, you know, I think he summarised everything that's good about the Liverpool side and Klopp. And not only that, I think we forget how young he still is. Like, it's insane how young Trent Alexander-Arnold is. So there are so many different aspects to him where it's, you know, most people probably understand that everyone's probably got a story for him, how much they love him, why they love him. And also he was involved in that cross taken quickly, bang. like goal. Like he's already got some iconic moments. And not only that, but the amount of crosses he puts in per game, the amount of times you see him do something with Mo Salah. It's also his combination of him with Mo Salah. It's the combination of him with, he's seen as the weaker side of the defense. There's things like that I find quite interesting.
Right, so Trent, one of the newbies, a couple of newbies. Let's take a trip back down memory lane. We've all enjoyed.
Ideally,
yeah, we all enjoyed this player. Wow. Wow. Of course, your left back is Alan Kennedy.
Of course, but you know who Alan Kennedy is. I know.
I know, but a lot of people won't know who Alan Kennedy is. So please enlighten us. And why on earth is he in your team when he backed up several years before you started watching football?
Right. So a few picks within this team are based on the names I heard a lot when I was a child and thought of as. When as a kid you hear them described and you've never seen the footage, and obviously there were VHSs when I was a kid, but we never really watched old finals and stuff. My dad really wasn't that kind of dad, not the kind of dad to go, you've got to watch this and see this. He'd just go, yeah, he was that. And he kind of knew that I probably would have watched and gone, yeah, sure. But I always heard, and there's another name in here where it's similar. I always heard the name Alan Kennedy. And throughout the time when I was growing up, it's weird. I feel like the right side of Liverpool has become quite important recently, but Liverpool fans have got this thing for left backs because of people like Alan Kennedy. And so, as a kid, I always went, bloody hell, John Arne Riise is amazing. And they'd always go, but he's no Alan Kennedy.
Right.
And not only that, obviously he scored like an incredible goal in I think it was the 81 final.
81. He did. He scored the only goal.
It was 81.
He scored the decisive penalty in 84.
Yes. So, but the one that I remember is 81. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason I remember 81, and I think I've been quite lucky in this sense, is I got to make a Liverpool documentary early in my radio life, where I got all the audio from the games, from the radio and from the television. And so I had to cut like little montages. And it's weird, but radio stuff for me feels so much more nostalgic than visual. And maybe it's just because of, I always want to be on the radio and I find audio very stimulating. So in my mind, it just cooks up all of these incredible images when I hear the commentary of Alan Kennedy. And there's this, it's not really the commentator, it's more like the actual crowd and the crackling of it. And the commentator's so formal about it. He's like, and a goal. And you're like, tell me how. Like, you can't even really imagine it. You get this sense of everything that's happening. And so he just kind of became a bit deified in my mind.
Okay, I'm getting it now. Okay.
And that's what I loved about it. And that's why when I made this documentary, I began to go back to my dad and go, God, I could get what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Like we did a section of the documentary about Hillsborough. And if I'm honest, like before, I'd always, I think everyone obviously pays their respects, but to some extent, I think most people pay lip service because they don't really understand like the gravity of that situation now, because it feels so long ago. You can never really imagine that happening at a football game now.
Yeah.
And then in the documentary, I interviewed people about it. I cut pieces of audio about it. And it's when you really get into the granular detail and you begin to kind of wrestle with how you're going to express some of these things that you start to go, that's the gravity of what's happened in the past. And it's not, and also, and I'll finish on this for this section. With Liverpool, their history was always slightly put down during the 90s when I was growing up, because it was a bit like, oh, you're living off your history. Yeah. So the history in my mind always became quite, don't talk about that, because it's a bit embarrassing that we're still talking about that. And it's only when I started to really, really talk about it and really try and wrestle with it and really try and make it into something to express to other people that I went, oh no, it's the complete opposite. Yeah. And then the only time it's really become real to me is when Klopp came in and we won the league. And the history becomes more and more important the more that happens throughout your life. But it becomes important not because it's history, but it's because you begin to connect back to it.
Sure.
And you begin to like take things from it, and you begin to understand why that was important to your own dad. You know this from having a kid. You start to look at things weirdly in a different way. You start to go, God, like anything will make you emotional.
Oh Christ.
Like anything.
Yeah.
Even now, like I could cry if you mentioned XYZ.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. You know, I don't really know
matters.
why.
I think that's what all that matters is that it matters a lot with a lot of different things. And so like things like that's why I get when you're saying. So first of all, just to pick that part because I think it's really interesting. What we don't focus on a lot of the times are the sounds, the feeling, the other senses. It's like what happened factually and watching a goal, right? But actually, it's more about like. Yeah, the body of people around you, and then, like you say, the other things. And also, when you then go back into your history of your club, because it's your club, and because it's your dad's club, and you're your dad's son, you then want to sort of, I don't know, like, be a sponge to all of that stuff. Because if you know more about that stuff, you then feel like you're woven into the fabric that little bit more. So that's really interesting.
And you and I have kind of had that conversation, haven't we? Before.
Yeah. And then the history part of it is interesting because, and I think for you in terms of going, okay, don't talk about the history too much because that was then, and I don't want to be hanging on the coattails of that. What it probably slaps you in the face with, and probably did so for you. Remember when you when you won the league and you're holding your son, was Absolutely. The fact that you all of a sudden go, today is history. Right, especially with great teams and great moments, and you're in it, you then get like heightened because you're like, oh shit, I'm in the history now. This is the Alan Kennedy in 1984. I'm in it right now because Trent just did that. He took that corner and we got back to 4-4 or whatever it was. Like that's where you realise that you're in it right now, and in 20 years' time, or 10 years' time, you're going to be talking to your son about that.
When he was born, like that year when he was born, and not only that, but like there's this real need. I think there's this real need in the moment to impress how important these things were, and also to like win an argument on the timeline or on the kickoff or in a show. Doing these kind of things, and the more you think about it, the more I did think about it, the more I was like, these things just become apparent to people throughout their life. So me arguing with someone who is at the stage that I was at when I was 16 or 17 or 18 or whatever is such a fruitless operation because I'm going, no, you don't, you're not, you know?
Well, and
but when they're my age,
the game changes. And also what happens is people got, so it's happening now. The Premier League's been going on for so long that now when we're having these conversations, you go, you can't put Tony Adams in, or you can't put Zola in because his stats aren't the same as Salah's. And it's like,
but Chris MD did put him in. So
yes. So, and he also put, who else did he put in? He put in Carlos Alberto.
Put on Carlos Alberto as well. And I thought that's the moment where I thought to myself,
that's Alan Kennedy.
I'm going to put Alan Kennedy in.
You, Chris MD put Carlos Alberto in. I'm putting Alan Kennedy.
I mean, to some extent, Chris MD can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, because he's Chris MD. And no one will ever question that. But what I like about that is there will be people in Chris MD's audience and your audience who will weirdly go, well, if Chris MD likes it. And then we're going back. Yeah. And I can't imagine people in future generations going, God, Carlos Alberto. Chris MD really loved him.
Yeah. We're going through the greats. Because actually, do you know what's an interesting one that keeps coming up is that Rory is adamant that Ashley Cole is better than Maldini, and every time he says it, I'm like, I mean, I'm sure you can find the argument for it, but no, is the answer. Sorry. It's so,
but also it's like they never played in the same. Well, they did. They obviously he went over there, but they never played in the same league or the same like. Comparing the two is also so bizarre because they are the 90s to the 2000s. So weird.
We spoke about this on WhatsApp the other day. It was like
we did.
Everything is just comparative and who's the greatest now.
Honestly,
I'm saying that within a Dream Team's format.
but the whole point is, surely isn't your format made to suck people? So it's almost like a bait and switch. So you go, got you in with that. But now we're doing the sentimental shit. Got ya.
Well, that is true. It's the whole, so for example, like Ali Fowlin is my favourite player of all time. And I guess what I have over
time.
others. Yeah. But the
Just
point
checking.
is like, of course I can't argue that he's better than Jordan Henderson
or any of the people on that list. Yeah.
But he is, in my mind.
Right, yeah.
And I like, you know, like we were saying at the start, I don't care what you think. And that's what kind of want dream teams to be. It's like, well, no, he's in my team because he's in my team, so f*** off.
But the word dream implies quite a lot in there. Like it's doing a lot of the work, but it is, of course, it's your dream team. Like no one is saying this starting 11 will run through any of the others, but no one's saying that this starting 11 has to be the starting 11 to beat all other starting 11s. Like my dream could be that I could do 11 guys I really like.
And in particular, I actually want that. But the problem you've got is you've got too many good players.
Right. And also I guess I've just witnessed, like, for me, it was a bit like, oh, do I do one that's a bit autobiographical? So like, you know, I talk about this tournament here that I went to this one time, or do I do one where it's like this? So you'll have to invite me back.
So
absolutely,
give me a player he's not good, but you love him.
Okay. In that case, Patrick Berger was one that I was sort of like, right, yeah. Patrick Berger never makes it into anyone's dream team, but I loved his hair. I honestly probably grew it out a little bit because of people like Patrick Berger when I was a kid. Sure. And not only that, there's quite a few iconic goals of his. Didn't particularly do anything that impressive in our team, but
good goals. He was good, wasn't he?
Yeah, but not achievement wise. There was no achievement there, and that's what people just go, well, he didn't win anything.
Yeah,
you go right, and that's exactly the definition.
That's exactly my point. Is that what? So that means they don't matter anymore. Rufus Brevitt matters. I'm trying to say.
It should be the title of the autobiography.
Rufus Brevitt matters. Yeah,
matters. But there's plenty like that, and you know, like my first tournament was. The first tournament I went to and like witnessed the whole thing was Euro 2012, and like there were plenty of players in there where I was like, oh, that's special that I'm here and witnessing this or that, and you know that's important.
Let's keep moving because this will be a 3-hour thing. Centre backs.
Yeah, exciting now.
Okay, yeah, I like this.
Which one do you want me to go with first? Because
we'll
go with the easy one.
Let's get Virgil van Dijk out of the way.
Sure. That's what a lot of people would love to do in the Premier League, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on. I mean, I'm not going to ask any question, Virgil van Dijk. So you've got as long as you want to talk about him, but once you've stopped, that's the end of him because there's a lot of chat about him.
Virgil van Dijk is the definition of this modern debate of who is the greatest of all time. Is he the greatest of all time while still playing? Is he Nesta? Is he whoever? And does he compare favourably to these guys? Is his trophy haul this? Is it that? The fact is that the fundamental change that he caused at Liverpool when he came into the side was so monumental and meaningful, I think, to a lot of Liverpool fans, that it validated so much of what we were told we should believe during the Klopp FSG era. And it was like, you're spending 75 million on that guy. And I think a lot of people going, yeah, but didn't quite know what that outcome would be. And it was that validation of the legend of Coutinho leaves, and in comes two less exciting, less sexy players who became more exciting, more sexy players. And that's why Virgil van Dijk matters to me. And not only that, you know, he is obviously, for me, I think he's already a club legend. And again, I think he's someone that he will oversee a lot of other things that happen at the club and what managers do, those kind of things. So it's important.
Do you know what I think is important, which hasn't been discussed about how important Virgil van Dijk is, and Alisson, I guess, but more so as an outfield player, Virgil van Dijk, is that I actually think him doing as well as he did and coming from Southampton and costing that much somehow takes pressure off future big signings, both for the club, for the fans,
right,
and most importantly for the players, and has probably led to other high-profile signings in terms of the amount of money it's costing them to do well because of the incredibly strong, broad trust that worked.
Sport, yeah,
and therefore Mane worked, and there's others that worked, but it's like I reckon the players when they come in, they might not in another club they might not be sure they're up to it, but because they've got Klopp and because they've seen the others that have done the business, they probably then go in and go, No, yeah, I'm. This will work, and here we go, and you hit the ground running, and you're Luis Diaz. Maybe I'm being romantic with that, but even if it's 1 or 2%, I think that does help.
I see that. I also think it brings an element of investment, or basically the Van Dijks and the Alissons in the side afford other signings the time to be able to do that as well. Like, Alisson is worth, how someone did some research the other day. It's something like, someone said, I think he would have been worth 12 points a season, but he's found a couple of times where he's been worth 17 or 18 or 20 points a season. And those people buy other people the time to be able to bed in and those sort of things. And maybe, you need to value those people while they're still around, because, they cost a lot of money now. And they're also, again, there's so much affection for Virgil van Dijk, and there's so much kind of mystery that surrounds him out on the pitch. Why is it that he is that scary? No one can quite answer these things.
It's phenomenal how mythical he became whilst playing in front of our eyes every week.
Yeah. In the Champions League and in the Premier League. And he's been consistent in both. So it's incredible. Yeah.
And I think that, like, when we talk about the sort of maturation of players, like in terms of the nostalgia of them, like he'll be this Henry figure, but for a centre back in about.
Absolutely, yeah. And what I love about him is that there are people who ask questions of him and sort of go, yeah, but he never matured until this age. Gives me a real chance to defend him, and I want that. Like, ask your stupid questions.
Yeah,
go on. That's what I like.
Do you sometimes consider giving them a warning, going, do you really want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely play into the character that I've affected. Do you really want to do this?
Because we could do this if you want to do.
Yeah. Let's dance.
Yeah. Your other centre-back, I like this pick because it's one that will not, again, there's a bit of a theme in our conversation here about, greats and all that stuff. This guy's probably not considered a great. However, I think he was incredibly necessary for Liverpool at the time, because if you don't bring the centre-backs prior to him, I was thinking about, were not good and not upstanding with what you want Liverpool to be. And then he came in very quietly as an unknown player in the Premier League, sort of set this new standard. Tell us about your second centre-back.
Sami Hyypiä is a club legend, and I think he always will be. I think the fact that he came in at almost the perfect time for Liverpool. Liverpool were really looking to turn things around, because it's fair to say the Roy Evans era had sort of gotten away from them a little bit. And it became about Liverpool becoming a more modernised team. And strangely, again, I picked another guy where it feels like he's modern. He was modern, but he evoked things from the old Liverpool sides. We loved a big player. We loved a colossus that just stands out there. And, look at him. He's glorious in red like that. And he looked scary. He was ready for a fight. He was not in that way where it's like a Roy Keane-esque sort of fight. We're talking like he was ready for a battle. Style, yeah, like there was a respectful nature about him. He seemed to understand the gravity of the club. And I also think any player that came in that era, it must have taken an incredible amount of mental resilience to not crumble, to not continue whatever it was that Liverpool were doing at that point. And it felt like a bit of a nosedive because of how high they'd gone. To steady that, he was really cheap, to be really consistent, made a massive difference. And looking back, you can go, wow, like that guy really helped put the brakes on and really helped to turn the club around and make it something different. Not only that, but I know he lost his pace later in his career, and I think that happens to a lot of players, but he was really fun to watch because he was similar to Van Dijk. It was a bit like, go on, man, give it a go, see what happens. And that was enjoyable.
And there was a period of, because when I'm thinking of those other centre-backs, I'm thinking Phil Babb, I'm thinking
Phil Babb, people like
Neil Ruddock, yeah. And also a lot of very awkwardly average foreign players that hadn't, what's his name? Cavani, was there a player called Cavani? Cavani, yeah, there was a lot of random bguys that sort of hadn't really worked properly, and it felt like then Julia maybe with his reputation brought in Hyypiä, brought in Sander Westerveld, brought in a lot of those players that you then sort of, when you think of Liverpool, like now from on top of the hill, there was the sort of 90s era where you just weren't at it really, if we're honest.
Really? No, completely true.
Then you had the Julio period. Then you sort of the Benitez period was strange actually. I wouldn't say that. I guess
there's only one player in here. Well, two technically, three from that. But you again, I can explain that. I can sort of quantify why the Benitez era was good and bad.
I'll tell you what. We're moving to your midfield then. Second gut goal for Mr. Gut, and one of the players is from that Benitez era. So there's two options. You've got two ways where you might be able to crowbar Jordan Henderson.
Absolutely, because I made a documentary about him.
Yes, you feel obliged. I mean, I don't think he'll watch this one, so don't worry about it too much.
Be surprised.
Is what I would say.
Not doing it to impress him.
Talk us through this first pairing, and then make your call.
So at the centre of midfield, most people would be gutted if I didn't put in this guy, because he's sort of become, obviously when I did my first sort of football podcast that was UK based, I would die on the hill for Xabi Alonso. Down the years, I think maybe that has been sort of eroded ever so slightly, because some people have gone, well, is he really as good? Did he do that? When he came in under Benitez, you have to understand, when Benitez signs two tiny little Spanish guys who are quite sort of scrawny and don't particularly fit what Liverpool are expecting, there is an element of, are we making another mistake here? Like, what are we? This guy's meant to be really good. Are we doing this?
Do you know what you also had all the time was you would have double signing pictures.
Yeah, all the time.
When I think of that, I think Liverpool. It's always Liverpool who did that, where it was like, we've bought 5 because we're trying to have a go at the title this year, and here they all are.
Jordan Henderson. So Benitez had left, but actually Jordan Henderson was one of those players who signed as like a 5 in a 5 of like Stuart Downing, Charlie Adam, Jordan Henderson, and like Brad Jones or someone like that. Like, it was another goalkeeper. I don't know if it was Brad Jones, but it was another goalkeeper. And they're all just standing there with these shirts, happy. And when I look back at it, I'm like, Xabi Alonso was like, he was bought for 10 million, very cheap. He was called the Don. I remember I sort of liked him a bit because I was quite sort of skinny. I had this kind of bushy hair, a bit like him as a kid as well. And I really sort of wanted a player to relate to. And then he was so calm. And he was just so the opposite of what Steven Gerrard was.
Yeah.
And he was so perfect for that midfield. And I loved Rafa Benitez, and I really wanted him to work. So he's in there. I think ultimately he didn't do as much at Liverpool as he should have. And that's maybe why you could creep someone like Jordan Henderson in there ahead of him. But then it was funny because when I sat down with Jordan and did the interview, I was like, why'd you pick number 14? And he was like, well, at the time I really liked Xabi Alonso. And I was like, we should be mates. Yeah. So he sort of gets in there for that reason. I feel like he's a bit of a footballer's footballer in that sense. And a lot of other footballers go, "Oh, you wouldn't understand." There are Chelsea fans, and I'm sure other fans at that time who go, "I just don't see it, mate." But one thing I would say about Alonso is, I loved the way that he influenced the game without being on the ball. Like, he would shepherd quite a lot on the pitch, and you can't. There was no stat to judge that. There wasn't really a stat of like just being in the way. He used his shadow a lot, which now everyone talks about. Everyone's like, oh yeah, but he was a very soft presser in that sense, in that part of the pitch. And it would just make the game go in another way. It would press people into a position where then Gerrard or Mascherano can make a tackle. But Alonso is just there. That was what I loved about him. That it's not gegenpressing, but it's pressing of a sort where it's like,
it's still an element of influence. It's reading the game. And
that's what he did.
Yeah, and on the ball has that. Do you know what I love about Thiago the most? And I think Alonso had the same thing. Was that he would go, yeah, you have it. And
right.
Do you want me to have it? Oh, I'll take it back. Okay, would you like it? Here we go.
Yeah.
And it's not like, okay, where's the killer pass, which he played numerous times. But the thing that probably Gerrard loved about him the most was that he just got on with it. He just went, well, he got it and gave it to me quickly.
Stopped it, go. Yeah, exactly.
And here you go. And I love. Yeah,
and if you it's getting the ball from Xabi Alonso that you must go, well, I must have it for a reason. Like, yes, I just got the ball from Xabi Alonso. This is great. It's the same. Like, you're right. It's the same with Thiago. You basically go, I'll do something good now because he did.
But also the element of getting the ball early. Like that's
right.
Again another. You can't. There's no statistic on that.
Right.
Whereas the difference between, if I get it to you, but 5 seconds later, it's too late. And I think that's what he was phenomenal at, because again, he was reading the game very quickly.
Also, because of how tight the cameras were back then, I feel like they're a little bit wider now because we've got the widescreen, obviously, and like we've gone away from 4:3 to 69. Like sometimes there'll be a pass and you go, what the hell is he? Brilliant. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. And because the camera would have to almost go a bit wider or have to follow the ball to then go, oh, there it is. But it would be a first time ridiculous pass. Like most people go first time and they go, you're there? He goes, you're good. And like, it's like really far. So that's what I loved about it. And then it was so accurate. I think he's got to make it into the team for that reason.
Okay. So no Hendo for this one.
No Hendo for this one.
Okay. Is this a midfielder, your next pick? Or you just done this based on the number?
I just went 1 to 11. Sorry,
okay,
I just went 1 to 11.
Okay,
there.
so where...
You want to go midfield next?
Let's stay with your midfield. It's easier for...
Now comes the real debate. Yeah, now comes the real debate.
Okay.
It's Jordan Henderson or Steven Gerrard.
Do you know what I thought you were going to do, right? I thought you were going to go... I'm going to get Hendo in now because I can't get Hendo in with Gerrard.
So the more I talked about it, the more I realised what it is. I love Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard gave me some great memories as a kid.
But I always found... Are you about to do this?
I always found him slightly unattainable, slightly... what is it that... Like, what is that thing? I don't know what it was. And I can't work out if there was an ego about him at the time that maybe he's grown out of, or maybe he's changed, or maybe he's realized that made me go, yeah, you know what? Maybe if you weren't trying to do so much, this Liverpool team would be a bit more balanced. Or maybe if you weren't trying to win the game, or maybe Xabi Alonso had the opposite effect of Gerrard. Get the ball from Alonso and you go, right, now, I'm Xabi Alonso's pass guy. Get the ball from Gerrard and you go, serious pressure now. The captain, who thinks we need to win everything, has just passed the ball to me. And there was an element of mutiny from him and Carragher under Benitez, which I totally get. There was an element of him being maybe just a little bit too big for the club. There was also an element of him wanting to leave. And then, when people started burning the shirts and those kind of things. So I feel like maybe we do deify him a bit too much. And I feel like it's because of the modern era, we can now look back and go, oh, that wasn't quite as good, because we got the validation from somewhere else now.
Here's a question I was thinking about earlier, and I thought I'll save it for now. And so you set me up beautifully. Would Gerrard be Gerrard in a Klopp team? Would he work in a Klopp team?
I feel like he would, because there are a lot of the factors that we liked about him that are Klopp factors: the intensity, the passion. People call him a passion merchant, Klopp, but I don't really know if that's really true. But the intensity, the passion, the technical proficiency. The fact is, I think he could probably do. He could definitely do. I think what Jordan Henderson does on the pitch.
But he wouldn't be the same superstar, would he? He wouldn't be Gerrard if he was playing his Klopp side. The reason he's Gerrard is because in that side he dragged them. Liverpool haven't ever really totally needed. Yes, there's been a beneficiary in terms of someone like Salah, but I wouldn't say Salah's dragged them. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that Gerrard would. And if Gerrard playing in that midfield three, he would be a component. He wouldn't be the guy, would he?
No, and I get that, but I feel like the dragging is the bit I love the least. That's the bit that I don't like. I don't like that feeling of it being like, oh, I've got to do this again, have I? Like, that's the opposite of how I want my players to feel, of how I want my guy. I feel like that has an impact on the guys around you when he goes, I'll do it again then. And the players are like, oh yeah, I guess he feels like he's got to do it again. I've sort of let him down in a way here. Sometimes that can have a detrimental effect on the side that my Jordan Henderson pick would do the opposite of. And the more that I made the documentary, the more I did the research, the more I found out that he goes, I want to make everyone else better around me. There were times where I heard, and again, I'll probably talk to Steven Gerrard at one point in my career or life or whatever it is. And I will completely go, you know what? Yeah, I shouldn't have said that stuff on James's show. And he'll go, what? And I'll go, yeah, I'm sorry. But you get my point.
Like, he hasn't watched.
He's just, it doesn't chime with me in the same way as I guess the others do. And I think there was a willingness to make him a club legend because we wanted a club legend. And he is. But you can go this high. We wanted him to be like, it's so high that it almost became detrimental to everyone, to everything. Steven Gerrard just had to remain up there. And I feel like that got in the way of so many other things.
I get what you're saying. It's harsh, but I know what you mean. And also I guess the environment you were in whilst during the Gerrard years was, it was 2005, but it was also 2009 and 10 and 11, which were quite tricky years. It feels a bit like, like Ronaldo comes in and the other Man United players are like, I think there was an element of that with Gerrard for sure. But
then I get it, because then there's obviously also real high quality players in there like Fernando Torres who react incredibly well to that. And I'd imagine if you got an ego that comes over and goes, listen, we're the guys, then you're the guys. But if you're not one of the guys, or you're a bit outside of that, I imagine that can feel a bit alienating and sometimes maybe can limit things.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe Liverpool does operate like that. Maybe it still does operate like that. And there are the guys and not the guys, and they just have this dynamic in a different way. But it doesn't feel that way anymore to me. And I feel like Gerrard under Klopp would have been a different player, and we still would have loved him. It's all right that you didn't take everything on your back and go, I'll do this. I still like you. I still care about you. But that's part of it, is it? But it feels for that reason like, it's some people who try maybe a bit too hard, or they go, but if I've done this thing and you should really appreciate that thing, it's like, I'll choose whether I appreciate that thing or not, mate. Jordan Henderson has made it difficult.
So you're going to go. Yeah. You are going Henderson.
Yeah.
I think that's madness personally. But
Jordan, well, good, because people like you detract from Jordan Henderson, and you're probably the reason we'll lose in Qatar.
Yeah, it'll definitely be me. It'll be definitely you swaying the public opinion.
Yeah.
Anyway,
people like you and your trollop.
Okay, so I mean,
Hendo goes in there for that reason.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want a minute on Hendo? Because I know we're going to do we're going to have a proper chat on Hendo.
There's a full on. Go watch the debrief about him. But really, it's that he's what I loved about him most was, I went into the documentary and I pitched it. So originally it was just meant to be an interview to launch this kit, which is why I got the kit. And I went, okay, great, yeah, I'll take that. And then it sort of turned into, they really like that. Why don't we turn this into a full thing? So it became a little bit more than that. From there, it kind of snowballed. And I originally went to kind of pitch the documentary, bigger idea. I went, we'll bust all the cliches, mate. Yeah, let's get beyond the surface. Let's dig in. And then the more I got in there and I chatted to people, the more I went, no, the cliches exist for a reason. And these things, they surround him for that reason. Now, whether we unpacked it as well as we could have in the doc is another question for another video. But I feel like those in football, sometimes and especially in sides, I wouldn't make a good footballer for this reason, because a manager would go, we're based on hard work and passion and all of this. And I'd go, what about these other concepts that we've been exploring?
That's not in my Venn diagram.
Yeah, that's not in my, Venn diagram. So, but the point I'm making is, within that, footballers need, and a team needs some concepts to latch onto. And Jordan Henderson makes those concepts, and is it actually in a Venn diagram. If he was a Venn diagram, all the other players see one thing that they can kind of make their bubble cross over with him with. So all the other quality players see that quality and go, I respect this. You're my captain. I see this. You're my guy. And I feel like this team needs some bringing together.
He's the middle of the 10 diagram.
I also think he would thrive in a side where he's allowed to run on a little bit and to be a little less systemized. So I'd actually love to see him put in a Gerrard role.
So Hendo makes it into your team. Let's move into the next line of it. So again, tell me your formation again. How are we getting your number 7 in?
Okay. This is where it starts to get a little bit tricky, but I feel like it might actually be a 4-2-3-1, where it's Hendo and Alonso at the base of the midfield. And therefore, I'll do it like this. Therefore, Kenny Dalglish sits in the kind of the center of that. And is allowed to drift. and would have smart players around him in a modern system that would go, sure, let's swap. So that's the way it worked for me. I mean, he's definitely tough enough to do the Firmino role, and I think he's got that smart nature. Yeah, I do feel a little bit like maybe he might actually swap out to the wing a little bit more than maybe you'd expect in this. Maybe he'll go out on the right, out on the left, cut in a little bit off of Torres or someone like that. Because Torres was very good at taking the ball down. I feel like in the modern game, Torres would be a bit more of a facilitator than he was, not just an out-and-out goal scorer, you know. Sort of ruined the... Yeah, but
got the next one. I mean. Well, yeah. So we now know the next one as well, which is great. Yeah. So we've got Dalglish in that role.
Dalglish off Torres, by the way, is partly why I'd love to do it. Like Torres loved having Gerrard just behind him, or loved to have whoever. I'd love to see Torres in that kind of modern system where he's sort of heading the ball down, getting away, and then Dalglish or whoever is off that.
Is Dalglish a similar one? It's kind of influenced by your dad. He's kind of known as a bit of a god, isn't he? There and of course gave well, he didn't give birth, but provided us with one of the greatest broadcasting talents we've got in the game today, in Kelly.
Of course. I mean, did he not birth Kelly? We'll never know, I suppose. And I think my point with Kenny is he deserves respect at Liverpool because of what he's achieved as a player, but also what he did in the aftermath of Hillsborough, in the fact that I think he means so much to the city of Liverpool. And he's sort of given his life to that city because of what's happened during his time. Not every player needs to do that. Like some other people would just go, okay, I'm sort of done. I need to walk away from that. I'm not a Scouser. You know, I wasn't born in Liverpool. He's from Scotland. You know, some other people can just walk away. And I feel like he didn't do that. If anything, he did the opposite. He sort of lent into it. He was very key during the time after Hillsborough, but also obviously he then crafted one of the greatest football sides. I think it was called Champagne Football. Liverpool played at that point. They were a great team that he made. And for him to do that, I think to play so well for Liverpool for such a sustained period and then be a manager and do so well there and then come back many years later. And I think, you know, in many ways, the time that he had the second time is really tainted by what this club stance on Suarez. And I think he could have managed that better. But I think everything else he did in that time was really vital to what Liverpool went on to become after that, because he was a real steadying, contributing factor to that. So he was great. And I think he's also just, he is the greatest Liverpool player of all time. And everyone says it. And even when you watch him now, you go, he'd be really good now. Yeah. When
I've seen clips of him, it's totally that. You can see he has phenomenal vision. I think the thing I'd like to say about Dalglish, I think, is that what is very, I think, maybe pertinent to maybe men actually a little bit more sometimes, or the idea of the sort of strong man, is that what I find so powerful about him and why I think he's held in such high esteem with Liverpool is the fact that, like you say, what he did in the aftermath of Hillsborough, putting aside all the things he did on the pitch, what I find so special about that is that he did that in a way where some people might kind of, and this sounds maybe unfair, and I'm obviously not picking any people in here, and I'm not being exclusive to Hillsborough here, but sometimes people can utilise a disaster or some kind of difficult moment as an opportunity for martyrdom. And
right.
I feel like Dalglish, like you're saying, in terms of what he did, the sort of quiet leadership that he showed, was done not through want, and actually probably through torture, actually, if you think of like how it has affected him and how he had to end up walking away from it all. So for him to firstly do that, to lean into something when it's not what he wants in any way, shape or form, because he is quite a quiet man, and then to continue with that through that torture, I think is really, really special. And
it sort of left them in it left them in this kind of sentimental place in Liverpool fans' hearts because of that. And obviously there's a stand named after him in the stadium like that. You know, nothing gets bigger than that, really. That's history. Yeah. And not only that, I think there's a documentary about him, and there are quite a few accounts of what he did in that time. It's one of those things where he didn't do it because he thought it would look good. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And I think that's kind of the point there, is there's a lot of cynicism and PR in the modern era. And I think to some extent, they did the opposite of that in that time. And that was really good. And not only that, he is he was a great footballer, and he came immediately after Kevin Keegan left the club.
Yeah.
And Keegan could have gone on this list in the same way, because I think my dad really loved Keegan, but the fact that he left the club in such a way, and then Kenny went on to have however long, was just too much.
Who's your dad's favourite player?
I think it's Keegan, just because I think that he was the right age for that. So he was born in 60. So by the time that Keegan came along, it was sort of, he had the hair, you get kind of caught up in all that. And I'd imagine that Keegan was quite a fun player to follow back then. He's sort of a bit of a weird figure of fun now. Like, people sort of make fun of him quite a lot, because he is quite a strange character. But I feel like, Keegan's that guy. But I feel like Dalglish is undeniable by everyone.
Totally.
In any era.
You spoke about Fernando Torres. Fernando Torres is a pick, playing alongside Dalglish. Is he in your top 3 players, the Liverpool players? Like, people, because it ended so disappointingly, didn't it? Like, but are you able to just focus on when he was you'd brought in a striker who was just fucking dynamite?
He was the best thing. It was literally everyone wanted Fernando Torres, and when we signed him, I was like, when he came to join Benitez, and I just remember all my Man United friends being like, no, he looks like a United player. He looks like a United player. And I was like, he does a little bit. But what it did was it made him look, in that time, that was shorthand for he looks like a successful player, and he looks like a good player. Yeah. And he looks like the kind of guy who's got his head screwed on. And he was so prolific. I don't think anyone else understands how good he was. Every time he got the ball, you were like, what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
And it was just, his finishing was insane. His footwork was mental. He had feet that looked slightly too big for him, so they looked a bit like flippers. But they did this thing where because they were also total 90s, they had massive colours down the side of them. They were either red and white or blue and white, whatever they were.
Yeah.
It made them look huge, sort of flaps that you would almost like a pinball machine. He'd pinball the ball, and it would catch it perfectly. Yeah. And it made there's a goal against Blackburn that I don't think I'll ever see again. And it was such a perfect goal. Someone's actually found a Nunez goal that has been similar, but Torres takes the ball down on his chest, turns and loops it up over the goalkeeper. And it is the most perfect finish. And it was when he had that hair with the little Alice band thing, and he would train it in, and he'd always be doing that the whole game. And he looked good, and Gerrard loved him, and not only that, but he was stronger than he looked. He looked like a little pretty boy, but then when people hit him, they'd bounce off him, and he absolutely pocketed Vidic, and I fucking hate Vidic. So it was just the fact that he pocketed Vidic and went to Old Trafford, and he was part of that 4-1, and there were I remember getting on text that same joke where it was Fernando Torres weighed in at the training ground, 14 or 15 stone overweight on Monday because he still had Vidic in his pocket. It was all those kind of things where I was just oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this Liverpool team are actually really good. And he was a part of the peak under Benitez, which was we had Albert Riera out on one wing and Dirk Kuyt in the other. And, it was that midfield 3 and him. They really made Liverpool believe again that they were really, really good. And they were a quality side. They beat so many great teams.
Those Man United victories as well. I don't think in your life you hadn't really had that kind of. You might have snuck a win. Danny Murphy scored one, and it was oh my god, we beat 1-0, but not a pumping, especially at Old Trafford. And he was just undeniable, wasn't he? When you talk about
he was amazing. And also not only that, but he seemed to love playing for Liverpool, and it was just that galling moment when everything began to fall apart when. Yeah. I think he basically, from the outside, it looked like he became quite depressed. And I mean, mentally quite depressed from what had gone on. And I just think it felt a bit like it was beginning to fall apart. And I imagine at that point you go, this could be, I might never win anything. I might just go down as that guy who failed.
That's a good point. That was a real problem that you had at Liverpool, and you will have a lot of those teams that aren't there yet. Is that you're always going to get picked off, say it happens at any club apart from those top 3-4 sides can't hang on to those players. That's what Brighton will have to continue to do. Leicester will have to continue to do. It's always the way, and you were kind of in that spot where you weren't there yet. You were sort of Spurs, weren't you? You're kind of
Yeah, and that changed. That changed when Coutinho left, and Klopp basically went, "Yeah,
no
cool,
more, no
all right,
more.
off you go." But we all went, "Oh no, like what's going to happen?" And then it was like, okay, and from then on, everyone was like, "So wait, if we buy this guy, what's wrong with him?" Or like, if we buy this guy, I bet he's really good, isn't he? It changes the way people deal with you because you were the winners in the transfer market, and we were losers on the end of that. Fernando Torres. I know Chelsea bought him for a lot of money, but.
And broadly, Liverpool every year bought 6 players, and this was the year, and it wasn't. And it turns out his name was Bruno Giroud, and that wasn't the player that you're supposed to get. So,
I mean, he almost made it in. He was he was the next Zidane.
Him and Latalak. I think it was another double picture, wasn't it?
He was great, and then Placis was also really good as well. There's lots of little French guys.
Never heard that name before. Okay, final 2 picks.
Final 2.
Can you do your number 11 for me? Because the number 10 is the shock for me.
Right. Okay. I like that. Okay. Billy Little. Do you know who Billy Little is?
I mean, now I've Googled him. Now you told it.
The reason he's in the team is my granddad would always talk about him. So similar to that, it was like, and when I was a kid, my granddad was one of the few Liverpool fans at that time, similar to my dad, who was sort of going, "This team really aren't as good as everyone thinks." And I go, "No, we've got Collymore and McManaman and Fowler and all these guys." Now, my granddad passed away in the mid-90s, so he never got to see any of this.
Right.
But it was that before he passed, he'd always go, "Billy Little." It was the way he'd talk about him. Like, it was just, you could see, he was a very understated man, my granddad, and he wouldn't often get sort of animated. But he would be so animated over Billy Little. Like, he loved this guy.
Were you rattled?
Yeah. I was such a little shit of a grandson. And also he did it before the era that made Liverpool great in a lot of people's minds. So, that's another huge factor, I think, it's a reminder. And the fact that he played for a Liverpool side, Liverpool did do things before Shankly came along. And Billy Little was someone that all the people of that age say something about. They all go, "He is my guy." Like, all the older gents wanted to be Billy Little. And also he's got this kind of cool name, and he sounds like an old school footballer. And
do you know the great old school footballers, they look sort of chunky. And if you find a picture of Billy Little, he looks like
he looks like a rugby player.
What's his name?
He looks like Martin. No, it's not Martin Lawrence.
Who's the guy?
Bad Boys.
Johnny Charles, is it? Is it Johnny Charles? Is the
mate? I see what you're saying. He looks a bit like a rugby player. He looks a bit like.
Is it Johnny Charles? Who's the Welsh player?
It's not Martin Lawrence. England.
John Charles. Yeah, John Charles. Yeah.
John Charles. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that changes everything.
He's got a similar look to him, and
he looks like Martin Johnson.
He does.
The rugby player.
Yeah, he does. He does. Good shout. So 1945-46. It's interesting you talk about your granddad. My granddad he was Scottish. He was going to play. He played a couple of times for Dundee, and then the war happened. And it kind of that was the sort of end of it for him, like, sadly. So when I see Billy Liddell and he's playing his first season's obviously like 1945, 46, 47. He's kind of that similar era. And there are probably a lot of lost footballers there, but fortunately he was kind of young enough. And in 54, 55, 40 games, 30 goals, 55, 56, 39, 27, scored a lot of goals.
And not only score a lot of goals, like, I remember my granddad used to go, "It's not Liverpool, it's Littlepool." And I was like, that is, to change a club name for a guy and is insane. So, it's that sort of stuff where not only that, I think Liverpool fans have this special affinity with certain players, and we kind of fall in love with them and we make them ours. And when they become yours, then they transcend generations. Yeah. And for me, that's what I love about him. He transcends those generations and reminds people, like, what Liverpool's based on, those kind of things.
And again, look, to be able to have those conversations, you cherish those conversations, don't you, with your granddad?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, even though at the time I didn't realize it, at the time you don't go, "This will be a cherished conversation in years to come."
And do you know what the difference is, actually? And this is sound bit boomery, but whatever, is the conversations you have with your dad and your granddad. Now it's like, "Oh, he's a player, let me show you, hang on, watch that." Whereas like my dad would tell me the story about Pele, and you'll go, okay, go on then. Tell me, and he hit the ball and it spanned the wrong way, and because that, it's just so much more majestic, isn't it? So that's what
it's nostalgia around it as well, and it's like, and also there's something about it. When you talk to your dad about those things, you'll see a bit of that younger man in him.
Yeah,
like a bit of that comes out, and that's what you got. That's what I got from my like 60-year-old granddad.
Yeah,
was that I got this. You go, oh,
when he lights up, especially.
Yeah, that is special, and it's the kind of thing that, again, at the time you don't go, you're lighting up because you're getting emotional, but like now, obviously, I can completely understand. Yeah, and absolutely, and he's really special in that sense. So, he's a great pick. Even if I do say so myself.
No, I was literally about to say the same thing. Final pick. Didn't see this name coming. I really, really didn't see this coming.
Should have.
Talk to me about it.
Number 14s have always been special. I think, Xabi Alonso is special, even though, close to not making it in the team. This number 14, I think, in a parallel universe, signs for Liverpool and is someone that Liverpool love, like Liverpool fans would love. And he always talked, whenever he's asked the question, who would you want to play for? Where would you want to play? He goes, I think Anfield. And you're like, he doesn't speak like that. But I think Anfield, and you're always like, oh yeah, like you would have been amazing. And Thierry Henry was part of such a special Arsenal team. I just remember him just being just the man. Like in that era, for me, he defines the Premier League. He is the best Premier League player in terms of he encapsulates everything I think the Premier League wanted to be in that era. International, suave. It was the fact that he was a Frenchman playing in England, so he sort of had this appreciation of the culture. Like he was the perfect marketing guy. And then when you put him on the pitch, everything he did was just, it seemed like he just always had something new. He didn't just play the same game. There's some people who just grind stuff out and they're always the same player. There was just like multiple different weird little things he did. Like he did that little foot, that little pass with the other foot. He did that weird, he did like a little, he did the thing where he chips it up and he goes, that was against Norwich. Over Bartes as well, there's like the chip up and over. Like there's so many goals. And then he was also just amazing at just doing little tricks and stuff, and like useful tricks, not just like a trick where you're like, oh, you can do a Rabona over someone's egg, can you? Like, this stuff was special, and he was suave and incredible and part of an amazing Arsenal side. And at that time, I think Arsenal, obviously as a Liverpool fan, I don't want to show too much appreciation towards Manchester United, so it's Arsenal for me. Arsenal were the team at that point. Yeah. You talked about boots earlier with Torres.
Henry had these beautiful vapors as well. I think
were they vapors or tiempos? One or the other. Yeah. They were lovely. Yeah, they were the vapors.
Socks were going up over his knees. Like looked like really like lean. I always like players that look like lean like that. And he's. When we do this series, there are certain players. There are players that are great, and then there are players that sort of kind of, like you're saying, sort of elevate above that. Where it's if you were to play them, and QPR, we had it a few times when we got back into the Premier League. There were certain players. I remember we played Liverpool, and Suarez was playing, and I was like, I'd have no clue how on earth we're supposed to stop this guy. Like I don't have an answer. Whereas like someone like Wayne Rooney, you were kind of going, oh, wow, his movement's great. He's clearly good. But it's like, oh, we might be able to keep him quiet today. Henry was like that Suarez level, or Torres when he was at his best, where it's like, there's no answers here. Because if you put the afterburners on, it's over.
and also the fact that there were a few like legendary moments with him. Like it felt like maybe in a simple, like Gerrard never got that validation. I think Henry got that validation because he won the Premier League title. And that sort of validated him in a way. And I always feel like he wanted a Champions League for Arsenal, and that would have been like undeniably the best Premier League era player, I think, at that point. But he did these single-handedly, I'm going to go and beat Real Madrid or go and beat blah, 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 and do it. And not only that, but like he had some iconic kits. I remember him in the centenary kit where it was like cranberry coloured. There was one where he had a yellow kit where they had like a bit of black piping around there as well. That was just so special. And then they had like that. It was like a navy kit that sort of went down to like a white. There are so many kits that are just Thierry Henry kits.
Yeah, that's true. It was a great time.
That's special.
For I really enjoyed the aesthetic of it all at that time. Football. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Which, and that, it was that era where modern mechanics and machinery were beginning to get good enough to go, we can actually make the kits fit the players.
It was. Yeah, that's so true.
And so players were starting to look a bit more, Freddie Lumbo was in that side. He was sexy, and like Pires was in that team. And he's also just, I know Henry buys into it a little bit now, but he was on every TV ad, like Va Va Voom was the thing that everyone wanted to say. And not only that, like he was in the Nike ad. He was in a few Nike ads.
He was a perfect Nike player as well. Like
perfect.
Just amazing pick. Yeah, good choice.
And the way he speaks, a beautiful accent. Like I know French is beautiful anyway, but the way that Thierry Henry speaks, you're just like,
I love that. Yeah, I love that about him now actually, because he's like, he could be so boring if he wanted to be, because he's like
so boring,
looking, but he's got like bags of personality, like, and he'll say whatever he wants to do, and he gets pissed off, and like I love all that. Yeah, great shout. Your manager, obviously, is our boy Jurgen.
Simple. Yeah, Jurgen Klopp, inspirational, great guy. I was incredibly nervous when I interviewed him. And he's got just such a presence, such an aura about him. And you can, like, you saw that at the screening with Jordan Henderson when we did the doc. Like, the way that people talk about him is just, you can tell when there's this energy coming off people, and you can tell when someone's a real alpha male, when they can just control the energy in the room. And I'd imagine that's what happens with Liverpool, is it's like he changes his energy and they'll change their energy. And you can feel, that's when you begin to realize what aura does and those kind of things. You can imagine that impacting a lot of people and kind of his importance and presence. And I really respect that.
Let's talk about that more in that little dot clip, which we're going to do now. Guys, if you enjoyed that, then please do hit the like button, because it helps the video. No, I think people love it. I loved it.
Bit long for me.
Stop it. But go check out the other episodes of this series. I absolutely love this series.
Chris MD was great.
We've got some amazing people. Chris MD, Lothar Matthäus,
Lothar.
Neda Manu is a really good one, actually. Really amazing. Goldbridge, Rory,
Spencer.
So many people. Spencer. Yeah.
Spencer was a good one.
Really chuffed with this.
You should be proud of this. You should be chuffed.
That's cool.
Yeah. Chuff yourself.
Right, me and you are about to talk again. As I said, subscribe to the channel and go check out that video, which is already out. See you next time.